the there's a cycle, right? A violence cycle that perpetuates between the relationship, and I understand that also generation wise, right?
Yeah, so within the relationship itself, you have a cycle of violence, and this is where, somebody, acts out towards you physically, may hurt you in some way, verbally hurt you, and then they will go into a phase where it's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done this." That's our honeymoon phase, right? Buying you flowers, buying you gifts, saying it's never gonna happen again. Well, then we go into the tension building phase, which is where the person starts to get agitated, that tension is building, and then they lash out again. And that cycle just perpetuates. And unfortunately for a victim, that can be very confusing, right? Because it's like, this person, you love this person, they promise they're going to do better, and then they do show better behavior, but then it usually goes right back into that cycle again. And then, as you said, you do have a generational cycle. Children who are in domestic violence households often go in one of two directions. One, they may become the victim. It's hard for when you grow up in a violent household, it's hard to see red flags. So it's hard to see in a future partner that this person, may be abusive because it's normal for you. You're used to seeing those kind of behaviors. So it's hard to tell that you're getting into an abusive situation. So they may become the victim, but then on the flip side, they could also become the perpetrator. So they've witnessed all this violence in the home and they think it's okay, and so they end up abusing others. And then that just continues generationally down the line. So that is part of our goal. Our name is an acronym, Stop Abuse in the Family Environment. We are trying to interject ourselves so that we can stop that cycle generationally as well. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Right, right. I mean, it's confusing, and also the the woman also has hope that the relationship is going to continue. I mean that this is a one off, and things are going to get better, right?
Hmm. Hmm. And the women face so many barriers too, and why it's so important that services like ours are free is one research study said the victims of domestic violence usually have 99% chance of financial abuse. So this is where, the abuser, you hear the classic phrase like, "Oh, you don't have to work, I'm going to take care of you." Well, when you don't have an income, that becomes a really strong area of control in the relationship, right? Like it's hard to leave when you don't make any money, you haven't worked for a couple years, so your resume doesn't look very good to employers. So you get stuck in it. Or we've also had where the abuser actually takes the victim's money and, from the paycheck and then gives them a tiny allowance in return. And then another way we've seen it is where the abuser actually will open credit cards with the person's name in it and then charge it up. And now the person is just in, so much debt coming into the relationship, or they didn't pay bills they promised they would pay, or a car payment. So now our victims have huge amounts of debt, not very much income, so it's important that these services are free so that they can heal and we can help them move on and stabilize financially.
Right, right. It's not only taking the take having no income, taking the income, but also what you're talking about is exploiting women on their credit.
Yeah, we see the credit exploitation quite a bit. Yeah, especially with
Right,
vehicles and credit cards.
right, right. And the way that the system is designed is if you are owner, if you're on the name of the card, then it doesn't matter who spend it, right? It's your
Yep.
credit. It's your line of credit. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
Which
if you're
kind
married in Nevada, it's considered kind of a I forget the term, like common law state. So basically, like if you're married, you pretty much are 50-50 how you split
of
things, and that can include debt. So
so
yeah. And
property and debt goes hand in hand in marriage in Nevada.
yeah. And a lot of times the abusive partners are the ones who can actually afford a decent lawyer, whereas the victims can't because they've been experiencing financial abuse. And so a lot of times we see our clients, really end up on the short end of the stick because the abuser has good lawyers. And we've seen them, have custody agreements. They keep taking the client back to court over and over and over again. And it basically wears the victim down because they can't afford to have these lawyers to protect them.